Welcome back to Uncontested Investing. Today we're joined by Jonny Britton, co-founder and CEO of LandTech. With an MA in Landscape Planning and Management from the University of Manchester and a background as a town planner turned software developer, Jonny has built LandTech into the UK's leading land acquisition technology, capturing over 40% of the market. He bootstrapped the business to a $50 million Series A in 2022, helping deliver over 400,000 houses. Now he's making waves in the US. Let's dive into Jonny's incredible journey and insights. So Jonny, welcome to this week's episode of Uncontested Investing. Happy to have you. Thank you for making the trip across the pond. We really appreciate your time here on this week's episode. Let's get right into it, though, because I don't think there's anywhere else to start than the origin story of LandTech. I believe you met the other co-founder or were introduced to the other co-founder through a tweet, and here we are months, years later, and you're a CEO of LandTech now. So can you talk about that story?
Yeah, it's a good story. It was very serendipitous, I would say. So I was at the end of my last project, which was another startup company, and I was looking for a new project to dive into. Well, my background's in town planning, and then I became a software developer, and so I was kind of thinking about what I could do next and how to apply that. And then there was a snowstorm in the northeast of England, where I'm from. In Durham, it gets really cold in winter. There was a lot of snow, and my parents at the time, I was living back with my parents. They'd gone off with the car, and I was left stranded in a house in a snowstorm, and so I couldn't do very much. Yeah. I found myself on social media more than usual, and on Twitter, it was called at the time. I saw this tweet: co-founder wanted for land-based tech startup, and I got curious about that. I reached out to the guy, and 2 weeks later we had formed a business together, and a decade later it's a real success story, and we're just launching in the US. So it's a good start of it.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. I got to imagine you're scrolling through Twitter and you see that, it's like, is he talking to me? It seems like tailor-made for you. That is a very funny story.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, I remember nothing really kind of grabs my attention, and that totally did. It called out to me, and then I sent him a huge long email, and he sent me a really long one back, and we thought we better meet because this is going nowhere, and the stars really aligned on that one.
Yeah, for sure. So speaking about social media, I mean, it's been over the course of the last decade, it's become in the palm of everybody's hand. It's the first thing we do in the morning, the last thing we do at night. Is there any ways that LandTech still takes advantage of that? How important do you think social media is? I mean, if nothing else, it can make connections like that. I think there's a lot of investors out there that are on the fence of getting involved in social media. Maybe it can help my business. Maybe it's a distraction. But I think you're a testament to how powerful a tool social media can be.
Absolutely. I think there's kind of two bits to that. Our company uses social media like it's one of our core go-to-market channels. Mm-hmm. We use memes, we use content, data-driven content. And some of the stuff we put out can seem quite small, but it gets picked up and it can travel really far. And the media often gets it as well. So we've been in front pages of newspapers all the time, just recently again from some of the work we've done. But it starts small, and it's just good quality content. And I think the interesting thing there is you have to understand what leverage is and where you can create leverage. Mm-hmm. Some people like to talk. I guess you might be yourself. Some people like to produce some good diagrams or have some data or just add good comments or just be a good person to be commentating on things. And so understanding where you fit in on all that, I think is the key to choosing how to use social media properly. For myself, I write a lot, and so I'm posting out a lot.
Very cool. That's a great point. So you mentioned you must like a challenge. You had just gotten out of a startup company. You found your way into LandTech, another startup. So you must be familiar with the early days of that, the challenges that go into that. Can you remember some of the challenges of getting LandTech off the ground and how you overcame that with your co-founder?
Yeah, I think they're arguably some of the more challenging times of the whole journey. Most people don't actually make it that far. And, you've really got to persevere. So, for example, it took us a year to even just work out what to do. Mm-hmm. And at that point, we needed a team to build the product that we needed. So we needed the funding to build the team, but we didn't have a product, so we couldn't demonstrate traction. And so we were uninvestable, and we had to find ways to hack that process.
Okay, yeah.
So we did things like pre-sales. So we found people who would buy it if we built it, and we had to use a lot of these kind of proof points to prove to investors that we're worth investing into. And then even then, we found the wrong market. We had the right solution in the wrong market, so we had to pivot our customer segment. Like, everything lined up, the value proposition was strong, the market's good, but the buyer was slightly different. Yeah. And so, there's tons of little adjustments that you need to make along the way.
Yep.
And so I think the key in that early stages is just being willing to listen to the user and to cast the net a little bit broader. Than you eventually become really focused, but you're trying to speak more broadly to people and empathize with their problems and just really understand who that customer is.
Yeah. That's very interesting stuff. So when you're going through those challenges, how satisfying, how gratifying maybe is it to kind of hit those benchmarks and realize that you're going in the right direction? Because as we talked about before, I think there's so many peaks and valleys when you're doing that startup company. So are you allowing yourself to enjoy those small wins? Are you kind of just taking it in stride and it's very a narrow, vision, always looking forward? What's that kind of like, balancing, the small wins for a company that wants to grow and expand?
Yeah, you've touched on something interesting there, because like the founder mindset, it has to be kind of relentless in some ways. But the team need to be taken on a journey. They need to be celebrated. They're contributing to the success. So as much as you're thinking, we did good there, we could do a little bit better there, we're going to do better next time, let's go for it. Yeah. They need to be fully feeling good and successful, and you really need to remember that you are part of a team, and everyone has the different motivations.
You touched on something a few answers ago as well, talking about writing. Are you writing a book? Is that something that we talked about before the interview? And can you kind of peel the lens back on that process? How's that been? What is it about? Does it pertain to business? Is it something that you're extremely passionate about?
Yeah, it is actually. I feel like I've got quite a unique point of view, in that I've been running, my background's all in land and property and planning, and now I've run a tech company for 10 years. And part of this process of watching the PropTech scene emerge. So I'm an expert in a couple of different fields, and yet the property industry's lagging behind in technology. So I've got quite a strong point of view about where the industry is going to change. And I really think that a few things have converged at the same time. AI has come in a big way, and that's going to change everything very significantly. And I think that the people who are going to benefit from all of this are the builders. And I think that the builders are going to be there's sometimes a little bit of, because there's no brand in development, it's hard to get a brand in development. It's project by project.
A little tentative, maybe.
Yeah, they don't need it really be seen as this kind of champion of the community. But I think that will all change when technology enables them to communicate with communities much more easily, because communities are actually going to have much more information than they did before, and they're going to see what's going on and the impacts of some of this stuff. So I'm kind of writing all this up at the moment.
Nice. How's that process been? Is that something that you feel like you're delegating your time properly? Is it kind of, that creative passion, is that kind of taken over? How has that been for you?
Really hard. Really hard. You've got to structure your day like with ruthless efficiency, just to get up and do that hour worth of writing, and as well as all the fires burning around the business that you've got to be focused on. Yeah, I've really struggled.
I can imagine the brain. There's just 7 things on the to-do list all at once. So you've talked a few times about you have a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit, the startup. You're writing a book, you're running a company. Where did this all start for you? Is this something that you kind of knew you wanted to do back in your university days? Was it something that you just kind of had a degree for and you kind of fell into it? What's your origin story of getting really invested into real estate in the property technical side of things or the technology side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of found my passion and interest in land from an early age. Just when I remember, where I live is like in the countryside, lots of green fields all around it, and then kind of got bulldozed over. And I was like, where do I walk my dog and where do I play football? And I got kind of curious about that, followed it into town planning at university and became a town planner. But on the side, Facebook came in and Twitter came in and mobile phones came in fast. Everything was moving really fast in that world of technology and social media. And town planning was going unbelievably slowly, and so I wanted to be involved in the fast moving world of things. And I was quite entrepreneurial. I was setting up sports clubs and ski clubs and always doing interesting money making things. So I kind of brought all that together.
No, I like that. A very slow moving process and a fast moving process, match them together, and here we are with LandTech. Very good stuff from Jonny Britton so far. Johnny, we're going to take our first break of the episode, give our sponsors a chance to get a shout out in, and we'll come back with the Money Making Minute. Thank you. REI Inc. is the premier monthly publication for real estate investors. Dive into a wealth of expert insights and knowledge from industry leaders and gain valuable regional market insights, ensuring you always have the best information right at your fingertips. Visit REIinc.com to elevate your real estate investment game today. And we're back with this week's episode of Uncontested Investing. I'm joined with Jonny Britton, CEO of LandTech. Johnny traveled all the way from the UK to sit in the chair across from me this week. So, Johnny, I really appreciate your time. And we've reached this point in the show. We're at the Money Making Minute. So for our listeners out there, we're going to give them a strategy, a habit, a daily part of your routine, a skill that you've maybe developed, anything that contributes to your success that you can maybe share with our listeners. Let's hear it. Your Money Making Minute.
What I think is the best thing to do when trying to make some money is to ensure that all of the interests are aligned. And I think that the best way to do that is by giving people equity. For me, it's like a law of nature that I've seen happen many, many times. When the people who get equity in a company are fully aligned to the success of the company. And I've seen things like people trying to do with bonuses, and it doesn't quite work the same, and sometimes people feel they're unhappy with the amount of bonus, or they sometimes feel like other people didn't work as hard as them and got as much bonus. With equity, everybody's fully aligned, and it doesn't really even make sense until you see early employees who were given a bit more equity than some of the later ones become the best employees even after 5 or 10 years. They work the hardest, they believe in the business, they think like an owner, and are willing to contribute and collaborate with the rest of the business really well. And so that would be my tip, which is to try and give people a bit more of the upside, get them bought into the mission, and give them equity.
That's a great tip there, Johnny. That's something that we haven't heard on the show before, so I appreciate you dropping some knowledge there and some original content. It seems very similar to the story of RCN Capital. As you were going through that answer, we as a company started out with 5 people, our CEO, maybe even less than that, and 1 or 2 people working, and those people are still tied to the company today. Though, as you mentioned, those first 5 or 10 people get really invested. So do you have people that come to mind at LandTech that you can maybe give a quick shout out to that have really helped you on your journey from a tweet in the northeast part of London, northeast part of England to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people I could mention in this, but there's one guy I'm going to call out in particular, and that's Callum Tansley. He was, I think, our third or even second employee, and he was our best salesman all the way through until he started leading the whole team. Large team underneath him in the UK, absolutely knocking it out the park for years, and now he is our main man in the US, and he's like an owner of the business. He's like a friend. He's like he's Mr. LandTech, and he's brilliant.
That's a cool strategy too. Getting people involved, getting them interested. It really sparks that initiative, right? As you mentioned, it's that ownership, that feeling that what they're doing matters because they're invested in it. Is that something that you came up with? Is that something that you learned from another savvy businessman or woman? What was the genesis of, I've got this idea, let's start giving people some equity and see the effects of it?
It's not something that I came up with. It was something that I read a lot about and heard and, talked with others about. I saw quite a few things like that. And, frankly, when I first started, I was a little bit green and wet behind the ears. I wasn't too aware about company culture or about equity and option pools and things like that. And I made a lot of mistakes in the beginning and saw things not work. But when you implement the best practice, especially things like your mission, your vision, your values of the company, giving people equity, taking them on that journey, where's it going to be? What are the milestones? Yeah, it really does change a lot.
Yeah. And you've talked about that, your journey kind of as you've risen to CEO. So I'm sure there's always two trains of thoughts. I'm sure there's more, but two main ones as CEO of LandTech, right? You've got your company's growth and expansion, and you've got your employees' growth, success, well-being, the culture that you mentioned. So what are some of your goals pertaining to both of those? How do you balance that? Because it can't always be easy, I imagine.
It's not always easy, and it's kind of it can be a real challenge. At a high level, I would say that you need to align them both. You need staff that are able to come and do a job, but especially in a company like ours, the business changes every 12 to 18 months as the scale of the challenge and what we're pushing for changes. And so you have to be growing and preparing people for the next step of that journey, which is a bit expensive, but the alternative is not to do it. Yeah. And you can create demoralization and no lack of career path. But I have seen a few pitfalls there as well. So we had a real growth journey, and particularly around 2021 when it was at the top of the market, the tech stocks were really high and cash was almost free for a lot of these big companies. Yeah. And they came in and gutted a lot of our teams because we had the best performing and the best trained teams, and they could come in and just offer wages that we weren't able to. But the alternative is to do nothing, and you end up with a demoralized, mediocre sales force or team, wider team. So it is a tricky one, and it's something we're always trying to improve on. And the other element for us is because of property, it's complex, right? It's not like there's not just one strategy, and so we have to educate our staff on how to train up our customers in multiple different strategies, as well as their functional line ownership type of management skills needed. And so, it's a constant battle. And again, I would say one of the best ways to overcome that is by giving that little bit of equity, because then they want to grow it, because then they feel like they own it and they take a lot of responsibility for themselves for that training. So we've seen that effect play out quite a lot.
It's one of my favorite questions to ask whenever I'm sitting across from a CEO is, the company's success and the employee's success, because you really do have to get creative. You're right. You do have to, in some ways, just align them and make sure that they're on the same path. But it seems like you have a good strategy, have it figured out. So cheers to that. Moving on to the software and town planning background. Again, that tweet, as you mentioned, it seems somewhat serendipitous that this role is kind of tailored for you. So how is your background in software and as a town planner kind of help maybe accelerate the growth at LandTech, maybe navigate some of the challenges otherwise, someone in your position with your experience might not have been able to solve? How has that all been for you?
Yeah, there's a lot there, and I wouldn't have been able to do LandTech if I didn't have the background in town planning. And I think one of the key things there is kind of zoning and planning is a bit of a guide, and the best site might be zoned in some way, but that might not be the best use of a site, and it could. But you need to understand how to navigate the market to really understand, is the juice worth the squeeze on getting it upzoned or rezoned, or thinking more about what the potential of that site is, and then how do you, the way that you do that, unless you're an expert or you know a lot about that subject, you rely on expensive consultants, and that can mean that it's not worth looking at things as carefully or as many different things that are a bit more complex. So having a bit of experience, and for myself, when I'm building, especially if I'm building software to help people understand these issues, I'm able to give them the context, understand what context they need in order to make those decisions a bit faster.
Yeah. Speaking of Callum, I've actually gotten a demo of the LandTech software. So it's very intuitive. I enjoyed every minute of it. It's impressive. So our listeners, LandTech, check it out if you get a moment. What are some of the features that you're maybe most proud of, or if you want to speak about how easy it is to use maybe? What's that like for you as a software engineer, seeing, there's probably a lot of code and background work and so much tinkering, but then it ends up being a beautiful website that's easy to use, easy to navigate, or we hope anyways. So what's that like from the background to the finished product, that journey as somebody that's in software?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So we gather data sources from ridiculously hard to access places, large PDFs and unstructured formats, and we extract that out and turn it into dots on a map. And it looks like a dot on a map, but behind the scenes, there's just a huge factory line of processes that go into that, making that dot. And it's incredibly rewarding when we hear the stories that someone's used our software and they started off with 2 people and now they're 15 people in an office and they couldn't live without us. Yeah. Or they were going to invest in a deal, but they opened the software and found something on the map which was instant deal breaker. It's software that drives all of the large agencies and home builders in the UK. And when you walk into an office and you see these banks of desks with all of the software being used on it, it is incredibly rewarding to know that we've changed the industry in that way.
Yep. So AI is something that comes up in almost every episode now on Uncontested Investing. Do you guys use AI to help deliver a better product to your users? How has that been? I'm sure, AI is somewhat of a double-edged sword if not used carefully or correctly. So how do you use it to tailor your solutions at LandTech?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big part of how we build our products. It has been for about 8 years, because we have to aggregate and then normalize planning rules and regulations, and now zoning rules and regulations. We invested a lot of money in a US company called Zonomics, who are doing this with the zoning codes and the future land use maps, and this is all based on using AI to do that. We use it to do something similar with the permits, and then the analysis of all the information, so that you can start to compare and contrast different regions for this path of growth and where the next hot areas are going to come up. And there's just masses of data that we need to analyze in order to start to give those scores. And so we use it in those kind of ways. But there's a really interesting point that I would think I'd like to make, which is, it's kind of what I'm writing about a little bit in this book as well, but because of the data we gather is very useful if you understand how to use the technical data. What does it mean that there's a difference between the future land use and the zoning code? Or what does it mean that a large area has got 30% more than approved than what the zoning says it should? What does that mean for the sites I'm looking at? You need to be able to interpret that. Yep. But AI enables that interpretation. And so I think that everybody, homeowners, home buyers, investors, are going to have access to just a massive amount of data that wasn't even available even just a couple of years ago. That's coming in fast.
Very cool. Yeah, so it's kind of like bridging the gap from what am I looking at to being able to easily understand it.
Exactly.
Very cool. Very cool. So I think we're at a point where we're going to take our next break. Sponsors are going to jump in. We'll be right back with Deal Maker. Stay tuned with Jonny Britton, CEO of LandTech. Use LandTech to source off-market opportunities using the most accurate data and advanced sourcing tools. Used by the biggest and best home builders, developers, and brokers, LandTech enables teams to work faster, smarter, and in a more aligned way through its collaboration tools. The land market is moving fast. Make sure your tools are up to speed. Welcome back to our audience. On this week's episode of Uncontested Investing, I'm joined by CEO at LandTech, Jonny Britton, Jonny, it's time for the deal breaker, deal maker. So let's get right into it. Essentially, the question is, what causes a deal to break down, or what causes a deal to get across the finish line? What do they have in common? What should people be looking out for? What should people be trying to avoid? What are things that can break a deal, and what are things that can make a deal? Go ahead.
There's one thing I would say that has made the biggest difference in all of my best deals, and that is optionality. And I think that what happens a lot of the time is that people try and find someone that they trust the most, or that they have aligned values, or that they see a future with. And I completely agree that you need to find these people, but I believe that process comes after having negotiated deals with optionality. And so what I mean by that is, when you're entering a deal, you can't just rely on a single person or company to deal with, because behind the scenes, that person who's fronting up that deal, as much as you like them and you trust them, they have pressures on them, and that pressure changes in different times of the deal. If things are going bad, they might be under a different type of pressure than when things are going good. And so it's best to enter into a negotiation having options, and then having the ability to negotiate the best terms for yourself and for everybody. And then once that you've got a selection of options, you then work out who are the best partners for the long term. Oftentimes when you're dealing with either a single person or a single company, that's when you really can fall into a bad place and in the deal. And if you become dependent on one of these people or companies, both sides normally recognize that, and this is a rational industry, and deals are all about trying to get the best position for yourself, and you're far less likely to get that if you're dependent on just that one party. You could fall into a time constraint, into a cash constraint, and I've seen this play out time and time again. You don't want to get into that situation.
You hit on a very interesting point there, and I think a lot of investors and listeners can take a lot from that deal breaker, deal maker segment, right? There's an art to negotiation. You don't want to get bogged down and, like you said, have to send all deals to one place or go through one person or one company. So for you, when you're negotiating, or maybe some skills that you've developed, what do you feel, or how do you feel about that process of learning how to negotiate? How did that come about for you?
Through a lot of trial and error. Yeah, definitely didn't get it right to begin with, and probably left too much money on the table. And then it's really good to reflect and to do retrospectives on the deals that you make, and to do that in general in business. I find actually retrospectives can be good. Review the quarter, review the deal that you've done. And so we've done a lot of that, and then just really learning about the type of deal that you're doing at the time. I generally find that you have to learn from books, because as soon as someone recognizes that you're into a good deal, they might try and position themselves inside the deal. Yeah. So I'm kind of quite booky in that respect, but a lot of it's just been practice, and it really has come down to that piece of advice I just gave there has been the single most useful thing. It is a process. Deals are a process. You fill up the funnel with the potential partners. You work them through. You offer various bits of information out at certain times in the deal. When you've got the last partners who are interested, then you can start negotiating tough on the terms before you find the best partner.
No, and I was hoping that was your answer, to be honest. A trial and error of it all, because again, valuable lesson for the investors out there, right? You're not gonna get every deal perfect. There is some leaps of faith that need to be taken, so to speak, right? You need to maybe scrape your knees a little bit before you reach that goal or reach that success. Paralysis by analysis is another commonly used term, right? You're overthinking it, you're unsure. You just got to learn by doing, and over the course of time, you perfect that skill, and then you get to where you are. And like you said, very, very insightful stuff there. Thank you.
You really do see a lot of paralysis analysis in a lot of deals, mm-hmm. and there's never a perfect deal, is there?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So back to the LandTech of it all, some exciting news for you guys. I'm not sure how recent it's been for you, but you expanded into the U.S. market. So How has that been for you? What are some of the challenges, and what are some of the issues you're looking to solve in the U.S. housing market by bringing it over to the Florida market so far?
Yeah, I mean, we honestly didn't expect to find an opportunity here. We're the market leader in the UK, and we've solved some very difficult technical problems, in particular the data aggregation piece of it. And so when we had a look at the US market and found that we thought that home builders, developers, investors could be better served with a solution like ours, and then we came over, did masses of interviews and customer feedback and market research, and we really found that little niche that we occupy, which is really this land and planning properties data sets. We were really excited. Suddenly our market grew massively, and we raised a large round of investment from US investors to bring us over and to do it in Florida. And some of the challenges are, again, just information asymmetry. So you're looking at a deal, but you've got to become a local expert in because it's so vast, such a big place. It takes time to get to know all the different zoning codes, all the different market conditions, what are the circumstances to get things approved or entitled, and that's what we specialize in. So we are experts in bringing all that data together, so you can become a local expert in any market straight away, and really understand how the market's changing and what you can do with sites that are not really they're not obvious to the eye. So what beyond the zoning, really, what is the opportunity?
Yeah. And then for you personally, or your company as a whole, I think this is a term you might relish in, but I read online that you're a potential disruptor to the real estate industry. What do you think when you hear that? I can see the smile coming to your face already. What's your thoughts on being a disruptor?
I'm okay being labelled as a disruptor. I remember back in the early days, I walked into some offices, or really nice offices, big companies in there. The people saw me take a laptop out the bag, and I saw the fear in their eyes. They'd made money, a lot of money, from offering the advice that I was now kind of putting in front of everybody on a screen, and you know, that I knew I was onto something at that point, and there's a real opportunity to do that. They're some of our largest clients now, so right. You know,
comes full circle.
It comes full circle. But the other thing I would say is that we are very mission driven as well. We're not just kind of milking the product and optimizing it for profit. We're investing that profit in the next lines of business that really try and solve the problem.
Yeah, so that segues perfectly into the next question. Some goals maybe throughout the course of the rest of 2024, over the next few years, you know, pertinent to the U.S. market and expansion. What are some of the goals that you have for the company?
So once we've got Florida rocking and rolling, and we're still in our early days of that, so we're building out some of the solutions. So we've still got an analysis part of the product to add. So what is that path of growth? What do our data sets tell us where the next hot areas are going to be? We're still getting that all refined. We've just released a nice mobile app, which means that it creates squads. So you can have an application. You can have your mobile app. You can see any site, and anyone can send you a site. So we can professionalize and make everything look really nice the way that sites are currently shared between users at the moment. You can get your Amazon delivery guy to find your sites. You can get your dog walker to find your sites. You know, everyone can suddenly start feeding you opportunities. And then we've got our big investment really is called a workbench, and that is taking sites. We believe that our clients have got a mountain to climb. They can find opportunities. Doesn't mean someone's going to sell you that opportunity. We can help them look at masses of opportunities, but they've still got to get the site entitled. They've got to get the scheme design. They've got to build their team around it, and that we're making a big push into that area at the moment. And so they're the three big areas of investment that we're putting into Florida. And when we've got that formula right, we'll probably scale that out very quickly to the rest of the country.
That's very cool. Some exciting stuff over at LandTech. I'll be on the lookout for that. That's great, Jonny. Thank you for sharing your story personally and professionally with the company. But we've gotten to the point in the episode where I can't wait any longer with somebody from the UK sitting across from me. I've got to hear about your favorite football team. I'll get it right for your sake. You might shudder if I call it soccer, but just your sporting memories from that part of the country. I'm somebody that's extremely invested from all the way in Connecticut with Chelsea FC. So you're a Newcastle fan, I understand?
I'm a big Newcastle United supporter, yeah.
Have you been to a game?
I've been to lots of games.
Yeah. What's that experience like? Because I think for the audience on this side of the pond, we just hear about the intensity, the passion. What's it like attending a Premier League match or maybe an FA Cup match?
Yeah, I mean, the Newcastle Stadium, St James's Park in particular, is well known for its boisterous fans. There's always some people with their tops off in the freezing colds, and they get the flags going around the whole stadium. They do hype it up, and it adds another player on the pitch. So even last season we beat Paris Saint-Germain, who we had no right to beat, just because of the wildness of the supporters.
Yeah, you're a fun fan base to watch. I like when games are televised there. And you yourself played rugby as well. So we talked about it a little bit before the episode. Your mentality on the rugby pitch, it seems like it's translated over into the business world a little bit with the go-getter attitude, the tenacity that you pursue your goals, ambitions. Are there any parallels there for you that you recognize from being a rugby player to now CEO at LandTech?
Yeah, I mean, that dedication, that commitment, that recognition that you're not the biggest fish in the pond, and if you want to maintain your position on the pitch, you got to fight harder. You got to work out what you need to do. So for me, I needed to get bigger. I needed to get fitter. So they were the things I focused on, and just being really focused and dedicated in how you win that particular battle that you're in. That translates today every day.
Jonny, thank you so much for stopping by. I think the last thing to do is let the people know how they can find you. What's the best way to reach LandTech? LinkedIn, social media? Is there a website? Maybe they want to find more about you and your story. When you publish that book, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of readers on that. Let's try to get that to the New York Times bestseller for you. But tell us, where we can find more of you and your company.
So our website's landtech.us. Please do sign up, get in touch. We'll show you the product. Personally, I'm on LinkedIn a lot. We've got a company presence there, and I love engaging with people in the industry, so would love to be in touch with people.
There you have it. Our uncontested investing listeners, go find Jonny Britton, CEO at LandTech. Jonny, thank you so much for the time, for the trip over. Wish you and your company nothing but success. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you on next week's episode of Uncontested Investing.
Thank you for listening to Uncontested Investing. Questions about today's episode or the podcast? Email podcast@rcncapital.com and make sure to follow REI Inc. magazine on LinkedIn and Facebook, and RCN Capital on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. See you all next time.